able to get them back. We still have your bad drive. We can pull them off there.
All right, Tom, thanks. No worries.
Susan Rice, Mill Street, 32%.
Really, how about the metal ones?
Middle Glens are down 24, 24.
So what should I do?
Well, we need to put out emails for letters. So let me get the numbers for you.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Those are the only two.
This morning was all three of the
I knew Bill would get there simply because Mary was really pushing. She sent out another message today. It's more of what opportunities do they have in this next week or so that they're in front of any kind of parents? Because it's going to, at this point, well, if any of them are current parents, and if they have gone on, then they need to do it. Because we're talking about 10 families, you know? 10 more people take a survey and they'll probably cross over the threshold.
Who else you working with right now?
I've got, in terms of contracts, I've got,
Maplebrook.
yeah, York Soul last year. I've got St. Charles here. Yeah. We indexed their steps.
Oh, 20 families.
Bloomingdale. Okay, we've got about 95 fund balance from last year, last negotiation. They gave one. Yeah, you bet.
Bad.
South Cooper.
Lunch, have to do this or that, just say, here, take the survey before you take, before we'll take your lunch from you. Or before we'll deliver this note.
But it's your resume exercise.
It didn't mention neighborhood, just never right. Some schools don't think they can, but somebody from jail.
I understand what they're but
Yeah, so if they have a
Dr.
current
Paul
parent.
has been out of town last week. So he was gone all last week. He's gone all this week. So he's back. But he did say he didn't.
I think it's got to the end of this month.
Yeah, I got those dates. Two of those dates in conflict with Luda now. So I just said, let's cancel those.
But it's hard to see where we get.
I think if Andrew can get there, anybody can.
Right now, we have to
Can you see it now?
Well, welcome everybody. A little loud. Since 6 p.m. this time, it's usually 5, but since 6 p.m. the board has been in closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. Also, collective negotiating matters between the districts and its employees or their representatives, and the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the district. I'll entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to come out of closed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're in open session. Once again, welcome everybody. Our mission, as always, is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. We'll start out with a roll call.
Board members present: Susan Price, Jackie Romberg, Mike Yanch, Susan Crotty, and Terry Fielder.
Thank you. So we'll move right on to public comments. At this point, I have one public comment form, so I'd ask Mr. Neil Samuels to come forward. As always, if you're speaking for yourself, you get 3 minutes, for a group 5 minutes, and if you could always start off with your name and address for the record.
Blue lights on or not?
Blue light on.
Blue lights on?
No,
You need to put it
need
on.
2 blue lights.
2 blue lights.
There you
Okay,
go.
how's that? Neil Samuels, 1003 Creekside Circle here in Naperville. I just have a few comments on the Illinois Virtual Charter School, the presentation we heard a couple weeks ago. And I'm urging the board to deny that application for 3 main reasons. First of all, calling this a nonprofit is really quite a stretch when all the services are being provided by an investor-backed business. By definition, the focus on K-12 is shareholder return, not student growth. I'd rather every single dollar we get from the taxpayers go to provide direct services to our diverse group of students. Rather than pay one CEO $5 million at our current salary, our current median salary, I'd rather hire or pay for 64 teachers. Second, from a strictly business perspective, the way this has come to the board causes me great concern. I've participated in hundreds of presentations to executive teams, and this one would have been thrown out within the first 15 minutes. The K-12 representative was completely unprepared, couldn't answer half of the very pertinent questions, and didn't even know we were funded over 80% by property taxes. I would have expected IVCS to send their heavy hitters, because District 203 is really a benchmark that other districts look to follow. And if we would have been convinced to go along with this, I'm sure others would have said, if they're doing it, it must be a good idea. So I was surprised when they send somebody with a year and a half experience from the for-profit side and not one of the 5 board members. Or are they simply, going through the motions, hoping that the Illinois Charter School Commission will overrule what I hope is a denial of the application? Finally, K-12's approach seems highly dependent on what they call a learning coach, and you just have to love that name. I'm very curious where that single working mom or that dual working family is going to find the time, the energy, the resource to come home and now do this new role called learning coach with very little training or support. I think about my own experience as a parent here. If I had a question, an issue, a teacher was always available because they have one for every 23 or 24. One teacher for every 23 or 24 students. I don't know how they're going to do it with one for every 60 as K-12 is proposing. Please don't get me wrong. I'm all in favor of experimenting with new ways of educating our children. And if the right charter school comes along that truly is a nonprofit, that has a fully fleshed out curriculum, and that has a teaching staff in place, and answers to how they will support the entire range of students, we will be a very willing listener. But this was not that charter school. So I urge you to deny our application and think about how we can band together with the other districts and perhaps influence the Illinois Charter School Commission so they don't overrule what I hope is a denial. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, that was the only request I got. Did anyone else want to make a public comment? Okay, then we'll move on. And we're moving right on to superintendent, staff, and school reports.
I'd like to invite Kevin Pops and Jackie Thornton to come up to the presentation table. They're going to share with the Board of Education and the community tonight the work of a committee that has been ongoing for the past couple of years, revolving around academic integrity. Mr. Ross, do you have any additional comments or introduction that need to be made at this time? Their presentation will be found in board docs. This is an opportunity for them to share with you procedures planned to be put in place around academic integrity. So I know Kevin's going to begin, so I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Yes, it is. Good evening. We're very pleased to be here. I'm Kevin Pops. I'm the principal at Naperville North High School.
And I'm Jackie Thornton, assistant principal at Naperville Central.
Okay. I'm actually here pinch hitting for Suzanne Cook, Dr. Cook, who passed away a couple of weeks ago. She was Jackie Thornton's partner over the 3-year period that our task force on academic integrity did its work. But Suzanne suffered under my micromanagement, and so she and I did a lot of work together on this. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, so I stepped in to take Suzanne's role for this evening. What we're going to present to you is the result of a really, really successful Naperville Central, Naperville North collaboration, a methodical process that began in the spring of 2010 and is working its way out this spring, so over a 3-year period. And we've been working together very successfully on this. The fact that it was a methodical process is also very nice because we've been able to take our time and go back to staff and to parents and to students and to show them at every point along the line, this is how this set of administrative procedures is evolving and what's your input? What do you think about each of these pieces? We're here, as Dr. Bridges said, to brief you on the administrative procedures. There's very little policy on the topic of academic integrity or cheating, board policy on this. So, and as a result of that, our administrative procedures in the past have been very brief, very succinct and concise, overly so. This started in the winter of 09-10. At the end of the 09 first semester, we had some instances of collaborative cheating on some exams at North. And we looked at the administrative procedures that we had, and we found that they didn't serve our purposes very well in explaining to students what was going on, explaining to parents what was going on, and in arriving at what we thought were fair outcomes. And more than anything else, it showed us that we didn't have a document that we could teach from. We didn't have a teaching document. We didn't have a curriculum to teach academic integrity. So we reached out to Naperville Central, who had a similar felt need, and made a partnership there, and have been working on this for the last 3 years. The slide says that our purposes were pretty straightforward. We wanted to have a document that we could use to teach academic integrity, and the existing language in our handbooks did not facilitate that. We also wanted to put students in a position where they were self-directed, learners, where they understood the values and the concepts behind academic integrity so they could sort out what the right thing and the wrong thing to do was in any situation. And we wanted to put our teachers in a position where they could teach from a document. And we wanted to be better partners with our parents, because we weren't able to provide parents with very robust explanations for why we did the things we did or how we defined things. And we wanted to achieve a greater degree of consistency and progressiveness. By progressiveness, I mean the way our disciplinary code works is to look at the individual, to look at what their particular set of behaviors, their history of behaviors were, and to tailor a consequence that's appropriate to their situation, their individual situation. We have foundational value statements for academic integrity. As Jackie will tell you, they were developed in 08-09. But those value statements, however valuable they were, did not provide any kind of definition of cheating. And they didn't provide any progressive consequences. The consequence that we had was one. It was one consequence for all kinds of cheating, and that was 0. That's it. And then the other thing that we really wanted, as I've said this several times now, is we needed to have a curriculum that we could teach from. So that was the driving purpose, the felt need behind our creation of our task force.
As Mr. Pops mentioned, in the 2008-2009 school year, both Naperville Central and Naperville North participated in a district committee in which we created the value statements, which you have in the board documents as the first page of our proposed procedures for academic integrity. And what we found, though, was that because these statements didn't coincide with, didn't include a significant definition of what academic integrity was or what it meant to violate our values, and it didn't have a definition of consequences, we didn't see a significant change in our practice. So when the events happened at Naperville North around the final exams in the winter of 2009, we were compelled to extend our collaboration and continue that collaboration to extend it into the definitions of academic integrity violations that would ultimately serve as a teaching tool, as well as an outlined set of consequences for these breaches. So a task force was again created in the spring of 2010 that was comprised of staff from both high schools, students, parents from both high schools, and administrators, a dean and an assistant principal or principal from each high school. Our first task was to truly understand the state of academic integrity specifically to Naperville North and Naperville Central. What was the magnitude of the problem, and what are the reasons or motivations behind cheating for our students? And we felt that the best way to obtain that information was through a survey. The second task was to research options for administrative procedures that would address the problem, that would create a teachable curriculum to address academic integrity, and bring a system of consequences that would bring consistency not only between the two schools but among teachers at the same school. The committee collected several academic integrity procedures from several high schools in our area and consulted a national expert in academic integrity. So after we received the results from the survey, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the research that was done through our neighbors and through our work with Dr. McKay at Rutgers University, a new set of academic integrity procedures was aligned with our foundational value statements and incorporated what we needed to address at Naperville North and Naperville Central. The set of procedures was then taken back to students, parents, and staff and reviewed several times, most recently in the fall of 2012. District administrators were also briefed on the progress of the committee along the way, and conversations were held between representatives of the committee and our junior high principals so that they would be aware of the work we were doing so that we could potentially in the future talk about alignment of instruction from the middle school through the high school. So to gather the data that we needed to make any decisions about education or of consequences, we needed to know more specifics about what was happening in our high schools. We were intent on creating our own survey and started to do research about the kind of survey we wanted to conduct, the kind of questions we wanted to ask, and we stumbled upon the research of Dr. Don McCabe at Rutgers University, and very much liked the survey that he offered. We formed a partnership with him, and that partnership allowed us to use his survey. So we surveyed our staff, our students, and our parents with his assistance. He also provided us with the data analysis. In that effort, then he used our data in his research, was our partnership in that. We surveyed our students in the fall of 2010, and we surveyed a total of 4,844 students. We surveyed the staff in the spring of 2011 and had a total of 302 faculty members respond. And then we surveyed parents in the fall of 2011 with 347 responses. All of those surveys provided were the same prompts, the same general idea, but the prompt was tailored to match the audience. So, and those are the questions that you have on the screen. What behaviors do you consider to be cheating? How serious an instance of cheating is the named behavior? And have you participated in or observed each instance of the behavior? The next slide shows an example from the student survey. And so what you can see is students were given a list in this section of the survey. Students were given a list of possible academic integrity violations, and they were asked to respond in two ways. The first is they were asked to respond as whether they themselves had ever actually participated in that kind of academic integrity violation. And then they were asked in the blue columns to say, how serious of an offense is that? So is it cheating? Is it trivial? Is it moderate? Or is it serious? And like I said, staff and parents were given similar prompts, just the wording was changed slightly to alter to meet the needs of that audience. The survey results showed that student self-reported behaviors at a level much higher than we consider acceptable. 54% of students at Central and at North report that they have cheated in some capacity. And only 42% of students responded that cheating is never justified. So they had a long list of reasons that a student might use to justify participation in that kind of academic integrity violation, and only 42% of students said it's never acceptable to cheat. We saw a substantial discrepancy between what students thought and what adults, the staff and the parents thought in terms of cheating behavior, but there was alignment between what staff and what parents thought in terms of academic integrity. So one of the interesting things to point out, an example of a discrepant result is the prompt was, is it cheating to get a question or an answer for a test from a student who has already taken the test? And students said yes, that is it cheating? Yes, 41% of students said yes, that is cheating. Staff and parents said yes 91% of the time, where students said it was cheating only 41% of the time. So that was an example of one area of teachable moment that came out of that survey, and we can address in the new procedures.
When we moved into the stage of working on language, Jackie mentioned earlier that we had collected academic integrity policies from other high schools that we considered reputable and admirable high schools. And also there were discussions with, well, why did you do it the way you did it? So we came up with certain key issues that we had to deal with as we wrote new academic integrity procedures. And one of them was, it was very clear that we felt a need to define. But the trick with defining is how much detail to go into. Because you can end up with very specific definitions of cheating behavior, and you will never keep up. You will never keep up. And the other thing you've done when you do that is you create negative space. That is, everything that you've said is cheating, and anything that you didn't name is not. And that's a problem. To have a really useful teaching document that would be lifelong learning would be to learn the values and the concepts behind cheating. So we attempted in our definitions to achieve a balance between a sufficient amount of detail to define the concept well, but not to claim that we had named every cheating behavior that there was. And I think you can see that in the document that you were given. Detailing consequences, we wanted a document, we wanted a system that matched our existing disciplinary system, our existing response to student behavior, which is a leveled system. So for instance, when you look at the document and you see that it has a level 1, level 2, and level 3, level 1 was designed to deal really mostly with what are called formative assessments, practice kinds of things. Level 2 was meant to deal with summative assessments, the end of the course, end of the unit types of assessments, and also multiple violations. If you had multiple violations of level 1, you could be at level 2. And then level 3 were the most egregious forms of cheating, where students steal a test, make copies of it, distribute it on the internet, that kind of thing. So we wanted a leveled procedure, and we wanted to be able to react. We wanted to be able to have, to tailor specific consequences to specific situations. And that's why we left in the consequences part quite a bit of teacher discretion. But again, we had to balance how well we defined the consequences, and then leaving the possibility for teacher discretion, because the teacher knows the classroom. They know the student. They know the particular assignment or project. They know what instructions they gave to the students or not. And so they're in a very important position to judge what was going on. And we have to respect that. They also wanted us to respect that. At the same time, they want consistency, and they accept progressiveness very much. They wanted to be able to still control their classroom appropriately. And then the other thing we wanted was a partnership between teachers and administrators, because one of the things that had been absent before was truly much administrative involvement in consequencing cheating at all. And we weren't a clearinghouse for information at all. So one of the goals was to cause communication to flow, and particularly to have it flow from teachers to administrators who could, in this case deans, who could collect the information and be knowledgeable partners with an individual teacher who may not have known that student actually cheated twice freshman year and once sophomore year, and now you've got him junior year, and you thought this was the first time. That kind of pooling of information and knowing what had been done in other situations, so we could have consistency from situation to situation as much as possible. So those were the 3 issues that we really needed to deal with in the written text.
And we think that we did that pretty well. In board docs this week, you received the 3-page document, which is the academic integrity procedures. The first page is our value statement. Those scrolls: honesty, responsibility, fairness, respect, and trust. That came from the 2008-2009 district-led committee. The next 2 pages are new, and those are, as Kevin mentioned, the first of those 2 new pages is the definitions of cheating, that we wanted to be specific while leaving room for interpretation, both from administrators, teachers, and from students. What I'd like to draw your attention to is the second sentence in that opening paragraph that says the classroom teacher and the administration will collaborate and exercise professional judgment in determining academic integrity violations. And then it does go on to provide the list of examples and definitions. So that is one of the foundational pieces of the new procedures, is that partnership between the dean in this case and the teachers, so that, as Kevin said, we have kind of a clearinghouse that will help us with consistency and help teachers not feel like they're alone in this process. The last page is the leveled consequences. And just like in the definition, we tried to be specific while leaving room to address every situation on a case-by-case basis, having that same team of professionals exercising their judgment around every instance. So in level 1, as Kevin said, those are violations that are on formative or on practice assignments. Level 2 are cheating or plagiarizing and summative assignments, summative assessments, summative assignments, or, as Kevin mentioned, multiple level 1 violations. And then a level 3 is theft or sale, distribution of those materials.
So the last slide presents to you where do we go from here. We're briefing you on these procedures. Later this spring, there isn't much left, but later this spring, we will orient staff on the final document. They have seen a very similar version to this that they last commented on, but we'll orient staff to the final document, take questions, work out procedures. with the goal in the fall of 2013 to open the school year and to open every school year with the teaching from this document, not only in communication arts classes, but in math classes, science classes, social studies classes, elective classes, to teach how this applies in in this discipline. And because cheating varies from discipline to discipline, what the opportunities are and what might be defined in one discipline versus another. So we plan to develop lessons that we can use to teach from this document so that students from 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade each year, they get reoriented to this as they move at different levels of their education and learn this set of concepts, this set of values, and the general guidelines that are provided in the definitions. Next year, we'll continue to look at the academic integrity issue because there's another side to the coin. One side of the coin is defining academic integrity and then consequencing it when it's not there. The other side is we know that students make a decision to cheat for reasons. And it's very important to understand what those reasons are and to do what we can to remove those reasons or to mitigate those reasons. There are certain things that we do sometimes that actually put students in a position where it seems rational to them to cut a corner or to take a shortcut or to do something that they don't know. So we need to work on that. We need to make sure that we're taking things out of the system that would cause students to think, well, it makes more sense in this case to copy that or to borrow this, that kind of thing. So that's our intention going forward.
Questions? Susan?
I'm fortunate to have my own focus group of high schoolers and their friends, and I like to bake brownies, so they have to come upstairs. And so last night I just, talked about this with them, and it was interesting. The thing that they liked, that it was codified, that they felt like there was nothing like that before. And they felt that that was important and a really good kind of adult step for them of laying out the expectations. I thought that wasn't what I expected to hear from them. And then the other thing was that they brought up was the self-plagiarism is something that, they threw out lots of words I can't say here, just that it's baloney. And they said, well, don't you do that with emails that you send people? Don't you do that? And they said, yeah, all the time. But I change them or I make it specific. And they said, well, we do that too. We might compare Catcher in the Rye to something else, and next time we might be comparing it to Freakonomics, or something like that. And that was a concern. Can you kind of go over that part of the conversation, because that was interesting to me?
That's an interesting thing that comes up in every area. In fact, it came up in the staff feedback outside of the communication arts department. Self-plagiarism isn't something that's discussed often, so that we had a strong reaction from some of our teaching staff as well to that. In the communication arts department, that is part of the teachable moment in this process and what is different, and that will be part of the education of what is plagiarism and how do you properly cite even yourself as a source when you are using your own work but in a different way. So it is interesting that students picked up on that as well. I'm kind of laughing because that was the issue or the part of this that we got the strongest reaction from staff outside of communication arts about as well.
It's also a big deal in my field, which is social studies and history. And that is, the basic version of this is, I wrote that paper, I think I'll use it again. And I'll hand it in.
Kevin, can you slide them?
I'll hand it in to satisfy another assignment, which wasn't the point of the learning experience that the teacher designed and that the curriculum provided for. So it's really about doing original work when you're asked to do original work. And if you're not doing original work, to attribute it correctly.
The other question I had, they laughed at the word instant messaging. They said that was so junior high. That was pretty funny.
Did they have a suggestion?
Yeah. But then they pulled up, right on their phones, they pulled up, study groups that they're in. And there's, what did you get on number 17? Was it true or false? And then they pulled up, AP, the whole guide and all the answers that are on the internet. That applies to this part of trust, right? That they wouldn't be doing that. And that was really surprising that it was just that at their fingertips.
The concept is supposed to be that they need to know what in that class with that teacher, what degree of collaboration is provided for. The kids were quick to say, but we're supposed to be collaborative workers. And what does that mean? And it means different things in different settings, and your responsibility as a learner in a school, in a college, is to understand what the guidelines are, what's permitted and what's not permitted, and to ask if you don't know. Would it be okay if we did this? Would it be okay if we did that? And to take very seriously the guidance that they're given.
And it was interesting, they felt that the copying from another student from them or them copying it was the most egregious thing. And it was nice to know that nobody at the table had participated in that, but they had participated in everything else in some way, shape, or form. And that really surprised me. I feel like the value of what's cheating, because there's so much out there, has shifted from what we see or what we think from our side of the table.
Absolutely. I think my favorite part of the process of constructing the value statements was that examination of the responsibility of all parts of the community. It's not just the students' responsibility. There is a responsibility placed on us as educators and us as community members and parents to look at this differently, because what students have access to at their fingertips changes by the minute, and so that means that we as educators have to be responding to that and adjusting our procedures as well. And so I think that is my favorite. Like I said, that's my favorite part of the value statement, is that it puts onus on all of us
We
to
held
do
our
current
breath.
original work.
We held our breath when we surveyed the parents, because they were the last ones we surveyed, and we were hoping that the parents would match the teachers.
Yeah.
And we were
Yes.
afraid that they might match the students, and then that would have put us in a very different teaching situation.
Right.
Yeah.
But the alignment between parent responses and teacher staff responses were very close.
Yes.
I just really like this because it defines who we want to be.
I agree.
I just really, you can be a cheater, you can be any of those things, any of us in whatever parts of our lives, but this is who I want to be, and there's a document, and I know a lot of work went into it, so I applaud you and Suzanne, who played a big role in this and everything, so.
Thank you.
I just think it's a great project, to echo what Susan said. Couple things, and they're going to, most of them in four-year schools will be going through this measure. So this is just one more way that District 203 is trying to help our students with that gap between high school and post-secondary. So I applaud you for, they're going to have this discussion and we'll be a little bit more knowledgeable. And equally important to me is the pressures that are on all students, that is equally important to this whole exercise, so that's coming right up on your plate. To Susan's point, so her unscientific focus group, so they find information, these students find information, find old tests, find things. It's really defining if that's cheating or not were the expectations of that classroom and of what happened in that classroom. So right now, today, are those conversations happening in the classroom? They're just not as formalized?
They haven't been systematized.
Okay.
We think that as this process went along, that a lot of teachers began to be more definitional up front and assume less. The old procedure used the word cheating without any detail whatsoever.
Right.
It meant whatever the teacher thought cheating was cheating.
Right.
We're seeing more conceptualization, and one of the trickiest areas is attribution. Attribution of where you got the information that you have, and to get across the idea that if it didn't come out of your head and out of your work, then you need to attribute the source. Whether we're talking about test questions, whether we're talking about a paragraph out of a book, whether we're talking about ideas I picked up in a structured Socratic dialogue, did you attribute those ideas to the source from which you got them? And that's a lifelong lesson. It's absolutely incredibly valuable lifelong lesson. And so those discussions have to take place between the students, teachers saying, I had this happen to a student, I want you all to know about it.
Right.
Or students going, well, wait a minute, does this fit that? And it doesn't have to be in a public forum. They could say, hey, I did this, or I want to do this. Is that okay? Does it fit this? And have a discussion about why or why not.
So when you say systematize, I think was your word, that bleeds kind of into consistency. So when it gets systematized, can't even say the word, there will be some consistency among disciplines in departments and all. Which brings me to my last question. You're calling them, my computer just fell asleep. You're calling them levels. Levels of consequences, 1, 2, and 3. Right. So which we're going to talk about later on tonight as well, our discipline code, our academic discipline code talks about classifications. Do you ever see those getting married to each other? So now you're saying, well, we have classification 1, 2, and 3 in student discipline, but then we have these levels. Do you see what I mean? They're called something different, and maybe that's okay. I don't need an answer. I just, I want to make sure, because some of them require a suspension. I think it was level 1. I read it a couple days ago. So I think it was level 1 had a suspension for a cheating consequence. I just want to make sure we don't have so many different levels, classifications, that people, that it gets a little too involved.
Yes. And I think we're not married to the term level, so I think we're open to that. We were very careful, though, in that these are procedures and not
policies. I applaud that. I applaud that. I think that's great.
Yeah, I can actually see the benefit possibly in using the terminology classification, like classification number 1, number 2. But I can also see a drawback in that I don't think we really want to confuse the two.
I agree. I don't.
I think it's
like
important
the
to separate
idea.
academic behavior from other kinds of
right, and that's why I
behavior.
really liked the fact it was called levels. I didn't know if you chose that consciously, but I liked that was different. So better to be lucky than good, whatever, right? But I think it's great. Anyhow, I'm done.
I think it comes at a particularly opportune time as well when we're talking about what is essentially one-to-one computing with students bringing their own devices to school, and that this issue that has come up, as well as at a time when I think that academically we've become a lot more competitive. When I first was here, when I first started, and even 10 years ago, we didn't see students applying and the numbers that they are to the diversity of schools that they're applying to, and the expectation that they'll go to high-performing colleges or private colleges. I think that we've seen a lot more diversity, and there's that pressure on there. And I think that it's creating a culture, along with that pressure of what it means to survive in that and to succeed, and what success is. And that cheating doesn't create success, or what the challenges are. I noticed that you used IMSA and New Trier, which is similar, very competitive cultures, very high-performing cultures, and this honor code creates that. And I think for our kids, they've been so responsive to deans. It's always impressed me about how kids will go talk to deans about things that they've seen in the bathroom, and even their own issues, because we've created a culture where they feel safe doing that. And I think creating a culture where they feel safe having that conversation, understanding what the expectations are and the rules, because that becomes very self-policing. I think if you talk to kids, they may be aware of things that are going on, but nobody said, you got to do something about that. When we've said, you're responsible for each other, they have been responsible for each other. So I think we're saying, you're responsible for this environment and this culture, you contribute to it, and making them part of it. I think there's a lot of value in that. We certainly have a tradition of doing it and being successful at it, so I believe that this one will be as well.
One of the things that isn't in here is Jackie and Suzanne worked out a pledge.
It is actually included
It
in
is.
the
It's
board
at the
doc.
end.
It's in the
Yeah,
board
yeah, the
document.
honor pledge, which is what they're going to sign.
They will sign in the fall.
In high school, but they do that in college.
Right. Yeah.
I like the way you have it structured with the community aspect, the educators, and the students themselves, so that when a student reads it, they can see that there's a tier that they need to follow, because that tier follows out through life too as well. I worked for a contractor that did a lot of government work, and the rigor that goes into some of these honesty policies is pretty tremendous. It goes down to if you're doing a government job, you can't take a government employee to lunch, or you can take a government employee to lunch so long as the government employee brings their own lunch and you can sit and have lunch with them, but you can't buy them lunch or anything else like that. There's very strict rules on that, and I think this really sets a good interactive policy for students to question teachers on what they're doing, and also challenge a teacher about some of the rules that they may throw out there, and if they're sort of waffling, or maybe this rule applies to this situation but doesn't apply to this other situation, gives them a good balance for life. Because I know that the reality is, if you're going to cheat, what students don't realize is that any career you go into is a very small niche. And once people figure out that you're a cheater in your career, it gets around to your peers very quickly, and it actually stagnates your potential growth. And you've got to learn how to function within that, and I think this gives them some good basic guidelines to negotiate that path.
Well, a couple, first of all, great program, and appreciate all the work you did into it. I love the the progressive consequences, the way they're defined, consistent. I love all that stuff. The one thing that, several people have alluded to, Kevin probably the most strongly, when you talk about, you're happy that the parents and the teachers came out the same way, and could that be simply a generational view on, as people have alluded to, in the access to information? And the reason I mention that is because one of the things you said is, well, if the kid isn't sure, he should ask. Well, the problem is, for them, it's just a given. Well, if I can find the darn thing on the internet, what do you mean I can't use it? It's there in the open. A generation ago, no, you can't go to the library to study. That's the way they would look at it. So, I appreciate that you're going to address a lot of that with individual classrooms and saying, okay, this is what I expect. But how do you get over that generational thing where you're expecting them to be self-directed and adjust to the teacher's expectations where they might not all be self-evident, to the student at least?
That's why we want the concepts that are being promoted here.
But the concepts could be so different.
The question was, are they timeless or not? And do we really think they're timeless? And certain things are time-bound. Certain kinds of information, certain avenues to information are time-bound. But the concept of attributing information that came from someone else to that person or thing or place is, I think, timeless.
The concepts are timeless, but the way they're used in society today have changed. Perfect example, is it not appropriate for a kid to look up AP study guides on the internet? He's getting it from someone else. It could be an official source, ACT. We even have people that we, I don't want to say recommend, but we accept. How is that different than them doing their own work? Studying for a test, for example.
I don't think there's any, I don't think it's ever been inappropriate to find study materials wherever you found them. We found them in the bottom drawer of the file cabinet in the history department office in college because the professors told us they were there. And so we went there and we went through the old tests and we looked at them. We knew, however, and I think it's still true, that we weren't to look at the actual test or the actual test questions. And if we had, the expectation would have been that we would have said, whoops, somehow this information became available to me. I need you to know that because I will not represent to you that those ideas, those answers, that information came from me. Okay. I think there's a difference between approximateness and similarity. And we'd be fools to think that with all the information out there that people weren't seeking assistance. The question is, do you have the actual materials?
I'm sorry.
Do you have them?
No, I have a question.
Okay. Well, and I think this is a huge step in that direction, but it's just so many things. It's just like, instant messaging. It's sometimes tough for them to put us, just as it is tough for us to put ourselves in their shoes. It's sometimes tough for them, but conversation is the beginning of that. So I appreciate that direction you're going. the values you were talking about, there is a clear one is what is right, what is wrong. Stephen Covey always talked about, there are certain core values that everybody realizes is right. You can't live a life through deceit and lying and stealing. Some people try, but society doesn't accept that. To Terry's point, one of the things that many people have learned is that not having integrity can ruin you professionally, and that's an important message to get across. But another message I would think is, besides that one thing is right and one thing is wrong, is the value of the learning itself. And if you just copy something, you're not learning, and you may never have the chance to go back and learn that. I've talked to so many people, and maybe it's happened to me once or twice, where you go, I wish I would have paid a little more attention, and I'd be in a better position right now. Is that going to be part of the teaching process, that you're here to learn, and you may not even realize how important this is? I mean, I think that's a very important point. Is that something you guys would talk about?
Absolutely.
Okay, the last thing is, since Susan Price jogged my memory a little bit, she mentioned the word honor code. And when I look at your pledge here, it's quite wordy. It looks like it was written by academics. I went to one of the institutions I went to, had an honor code that said, "We will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate among us who do." Pretty straightforward, very understandable. You look at our mission statement. You mentioned they all know it. It's not 5 scrolls long. Is that something that was in part of the discussion 5 years ago when this thing was created? That this amount of detail, or were the concepts more important? I mean, because if you don't have enough detail, then you open yourself up to that thing.
The concepts were clearly more important in that process. In fact, at that point in the 2008-2009 school year, when we brought the scrolls to the students for their feedback, they said, "This is great, but we're not going to read this." So they were very honest about that. So our intent with the integrity pledge is that follows the lesson that they have, so they're not reading that and internalizing it on their own. It's following the lesson that they're having with their teacher, and then as a basis of that, signing that they understand what the intent is of that pledge, and not trying to sort through all of those words on their own.
Suzanne and I argued a lot about whether we could go to an honor code system, maybe for some classes, maybe for certain grade levels. Would we be ready to do that at the 12th grade level? Because a true honor code is monitored by the students themselves and no one else. And we just did not feel, especially given the survey results that we got, that we were ready at this time to go in that direction. Let's see how well we can teach the concepts before we go over that, before we go to that. But that would be an ideal in possibly in certain classes or certain grade levels to try to pull that off. I pledge on my honor as a gentleman that I've neither given nor received assistance on this work. That's the one that I had to do. So.
Thank you, Terry.
Just Mike jogged my memory on something. If you go to a lot of districts, you'll see some of these scrolls up displayed prominently. They display them in the boardroom, as one example, and they'll display them inside the school. Is there any plans to display them more? Because you can sign something and you go about your business and you kind of forget. But I think to Mike's point about how you remind somebody and are they going to read it, the more frequently it's available for viewing, the more likely they are to read it. So is there any plans to disperse them in the buildings? Or, of course, we could put them in a boardroom, too. I don't want to say it too many times, but it would be nice.
Yes, I have been in discussions with our Student Advisory Council about the best way to advertise, I guess, would be the best way to describe that, and they are coming back to me with a plan. So the students are working on the best way to do that for us.
If there is nothing else, that was excellent work, obviously. I love where it's going, and it's obviously very, very important.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No more reports. Well, then, we might as well go to the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
Said no more reports. consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda, item 6.01, adoption of personnel report as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Roll call.
Romberg?
Yes.
Crotty?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Price?
Yes.
Fielded?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, discussion without action. As promised 2 weeks ago, we are back to now hopefully discuss in a little more depth the Illinois Virtual Charter School Fox River Valley proposal that was presented to us last month. I'd like, for history, for those people that weren't here last week, 2 weeks ago, excuse me, or didn't view the meeting on the internet, we had a public hearing where a representative of the, actually of K-12, speaking for the virtual charter school, came by and made a short presentation and then attempted to answer our questions. I think it's fair to say that he didn't have all the answers, and he was going to get back to us with them. And I'll let Mr. Bridges talk about what the response has been. I will say that, just to remind everybody of the timeline, from the time we were given it, we had 45 days to to have a hearing, which we did. Then from the hearing, we had 30 days to have a vote and make a decision on whether to approve or deny. We will be making that decision on 15th of April, which is within that timeline. So this is purely for discussion, and it will be in 2 weeks before we actually take a vote on the subject itself. But right now, Mr. Bridges and his staff have been hard at work trying to get more information from, I believe, both K-12 and the charter school. So I'll let him update the board and the public on what he's discovered.
Great, thanks. I'm going to take a few minutes, and some of what I say may be repetitive to a couple of things that Mike just commented on, but I do want to just reemphasize those. But as was Mr. Yench said, we had the public hearing on March 18th as required by the timeline, and we were given a presentation from a K-12 rep. It's important to note that none of the board members of Virtual Learning Solutions, the not-for-profit company, were in attendance at that meeting. In addition to that presentation, there was public comment, followed by questions from the administration and the Board of Education. As Mr. Yench said, many of our questions remained unanswered at that time. And as we said to the representative of K-12 that was here, we would submit those questions to them, all 143 of those questions to them, and request that we have a response by the end of the workday on the 21st of March in terms of looking at our scheduling and preparation for the board's discussion this evening. On the 19th, the day after, I had a follow-up correspondence with the representative that was here, thanking him for his presentation, reminding and requesting for response from the questions that were provided, and a review of the timeline. But I also want you to know, board members, that I did invite him or a representative to attend this evening's meeting to hear the conversation, perhaps address questions, and if appropriate, respond with additional information. On the 21st of March, I received an email from Charnel Jackson, the president of the Illinois Virtual Charter School in the Fox River Valley, acknowledging the receipt of our questions with the intent and the plan of the Virtual Learning Solutions to respond to those questions. The next day, the 22nd, received another email from Ms. Jackson indicating that they were unable to provide responses by March 21st and hoped our board would consider info that they would provide by next week, meaning last week. So I responded with a review of our timeline, the need for information to assist you as a board with your decision making. And at that time, I also submitted some additional questions, which were posted for you in board docs and are posted in public content on board docs also. I'd like to highlight a couple of the, some critical questions or issues that were out there that we're really seeking some information on. Section 27A-5 of the Illinois School Code regarding charter school requirement states a charter school shall be a public, non-sectarian, non-religious, non-home-based, and non-profit school. Charter school should be organized and operated as a non-profit cooperation, and it goes on. The proposal we heard on the 18th appears to be very home-based, so we were hoping for some more information, which we have not yet gotten, on how the proposal meets that requirement of the code. We'd also asked for Virtual Learning Solutions, which is a non-for-profit cooperation, to discuss with us and provide information for us on how a significant portion of their proceeds would be directed to K-12, a for-profit incorporation, which appears to be contradictory to the requirement. Again, then we went on with the proposal submitted indicates that Virtual Learning Solutions the Illinois Virtual Charter School will implement the K-12 curriculum. Well, what we heard from the representative on March 18th, Mr. Wazaloo, is confirmed that Virtual Learning Solutions had not yet formally contracted with K-12 for the curriculum. There's only intent to contract or a template or a proposal for a contract. But this Board of Education, I think, in terms of making your decision, needs to see the final contract prior to making approval, which I have not yet received. It's our understanding that what we did receive was a template, not the actual contract, that was going to bind these parties together. We expected some information then about what other curriculum providers Virtual Learning Solutions may have considered, and I talked about the contract. Also, in that email on that last correspondence on the 22nd, I renewed my invitation to attend this evening to continue our discussion with them. On the 26th of March, I received an email from Ms. Jackson indicating that a representative would not be available to attend tonight's meeting. I don't see anyone here. Is there a representative of the board for Virtual Learning Solutions or K-12 in attendance? Let's confirm that. And that they would not have anyone here, and that they would plan to have responses to our questions by the 29th, which would have been Friday. I responded with a continued request for information to help you in your decision-making and reminded them of our timeline, your timeline as a Board of Education discussion tonight with action on the 15th. Then on Friday the 29th, I once again received an email from Ms. Jackson informing us that they could not provide information and answers in time for tonight's meeting for the Board of Education. So there's a lot of, obviously, outstanding things kind of hanging out there. Responses to the questions, well over 150 now that we've submitted. Verification of an actual content or contract with K-12 for the delivery of the curriculum, and any evidence of any contract or agreement that would be used to bind all the parties together, which we have not yet seen. So the administration, as Ms. Viench said, credit to the administrative cabinet and staff, but then also to the learning services directors and department who work with our cabinet on putting together a significant amount of information for you, which is loaded in the public content on board docs. Just kind of call attention to what those are. The D203 V2 item are slides providing an overview of the 203 curriculum, which I know as a board you're already very familiar with. The document entitled ILVCS D203 Curriculum Comparison is a K-8 curriculum comparison, what is offered by 203 side by side with the Illinois Virtual Charter School. Document entitled High School Course Comparison is a side-by-side comparison, again, of the courses that are available at our two high schools compared to those courses that are available through the charter proposal. Labeled Alt Ed Slides provides an overview of non-traditional and alternative education programs we have available to our students and the benefits of those programs for our students, as well as a document entitled Charter School Side-by-Side Comparison, Special Ed in 504, which provides for you an overview and a comparison of what the virtual learning schools, virtual learning solutions proposal suggests may be offered next to what 203 students currently receive. You'll see that our services and support to students at risk far exceed those that are offered by the charter school. Document entitled Virtual Solutions for District 203 Students. We do recognize that online and virtual learning has a place in the future in education. So you'll see ways in which 203 students are currently engaged through virtual platforms. And then the final document that we've made available to you is the potential economic impact. While there was some uncertainty within the proposal itself, as well as what we heard in the presentation on the 18th, you'll see an overview of potential costs to 203 if it were to approve this charter. So the administration and our team has reviewed the proposal, and we still have many unanswered questions. And while we recognize that there's, like I said, the potential for a role of online learning, we do not believe the proposal we have received for a full-time virtual school is appropriate. We feel students who opt to enroll in this proposed virtual school would be limiting their options in their experiences. The proposal itself does not satisfy several of the statutory requirements, and the applicants have failed to produce evidence of support from students, parents, and the community. So at this time, my recommendation to you then, based on that information, is that you would not approve this charter application. But this is an opportunity for you to have continued conversation, ask us questions. Members of the cabinet and also learning services team are available to respond to any questions you have regarding the specific documents. So we'll take questions or invite the board to have a conversation.
Well, I just sort of have more of a statement. Clearly, from their complete lack of interest in the charter guidelines and the process is defined by state law, the Illinois Virtual Charter School believes that it does not need to work within the school districts and their board and staff. Their lack of participation in this process is evidenced by sending an unprepared staff member from their contracting organization, their unwillingness to respond to questions, and the fact that they didn't even send us the real contract to consider seems to indicate that they are either not really interested in working in Illinois or that they believe there is another way that they can receive their charter. In fact, there is, as the Illinois Charter School Commission, a group that is under the Illinois State Board of Education but not answerable to it nor to any other authority, has the ability to override the decisions of school districts when it comes to charter schools. K-12, I will note, the for-profit education group has spent, according to one source, $36,000 in contributions to Illinois lawmakers in the past 6 years. Please understand what I'm saying. The Illinois Charter School Commission has the ability to tell our school district that we have to pay money to a charter school, money that does not come from the state or from the Illinois Charter School Commission, but from our local taxpayers through their property taxes. The Illinois Charter School Commission, an unelected group of individuals from around the state of Illinois, not from Naperville, has the ability to override the decisions of locally elected officials, your school board members, representing the values and priorities of your community, to take money from your students and your schools to pay a for-profit company to provide education that has not in any way proven to be superior than what is provided by our schools. I think this is a shameful circumstance, and I encourage all of the people who have contacted us to contact their local legislators and the governor and the members of the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Charter School Commission, all of which is available easily online, to tell them what they think of this situation. I know I will.
Yeah. So when the gentleman was here answering questions, the one thing I thought of, and I've done a couple hundred presentations in my life, sales presentations, I thought if I were to come to a room and not be able to answer, 1 out of 4 questions at least, I certainly wouldn't get the job. So I don't know why they would even be deserving of consideration at this point, because he couldn't answer question 1 as far as how this program is going to be backed up. So I'd have to echo some other comments to say that they are clearly not interested. Maybe they're not interested in Naperville 203. I would say they did take a shotgun approach by reaching out to 19 districts, hoping to latch on to a few districts at least that will maybe have some need for it, for some online learning, and thereby garner some profit for themselves. While the contract itself, wasn't the final contract, I did read it, or at least 75% of it. One of the comments I initially made to Dan, I said, it was not clear to me how they were going to educate the kids, what the process was going to be, how questions were going to be answered, what kind of teacher participation was going to be there, or even how the students were going to be selected. What was crystal clear, though, was the profit margin they were going to make on the whole deal. And it even it talks about surplus funds, where does surplus funds go, what percentage of the surplus funds come back to K-12 and so forth. And I was really impressed with the business model in that regard. And I thought if I could get those kind of fees on my jobs, I could probably retire a lot sooner than when I'm going to be able to. I just think the whole thing's unstructured. I think the learning coaches are a big flaw. It's an unreasonable burden if you're going to target kids who are disadvantaged in the first place, who probably don't have a good home life, and you're dependent upon parents who may be just as equally disadvantaged, have to work hard all day and then come home and answer questions for homework and so forth, or wait 24 to 48 hours for a teacher to get back to you with a question. It's unacceptable. And when I was first seated in 2007, and Alan Lees approached us with the first student we had to expel, I remember telling Alan, I said, you didn't explain to me that as being a board member had to expel somebody. I said, but we have to do better. And we have to be better than just throwing a kid out on the street. We have to find a way to educate them. And I don't think that this charter school is going to do that.
Thank you, Susan, for so succinctly putting everything that I think we felt in the room. I think the waste of time to our staff and to our board and all the important things that we go over was one of the most frustrating parts of it. I mean, the hours and the time and the research and your staff doing things to dance through this hoop for them that we have no control over, like you say, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that they can fly things out there and have no substantive background or be able to answer any questions. So I apologize for them for wasting everyone's time and the community's resources, and not just ours. When you look and think that they did this to 18 different, it's just silly.
I had a very spirited conversation with Zach when he was here 2 weeks ago about how on earth he was going to help these students, what supports were going to be there, and how this learning coach who probably couldn't get through to this child, these parents, if that was the learning coach, how this was ever going to work. But so I echo what everyone has said. It's been just an incredible waste of time. And I guess what it's enriched for me is how great our programming is. So I guess when I read through these comparisons over the weekend, I thought, wow, we really do a lot. There are a lot of resources. You just see them again when you see them in print. But a question I had for you, Dan, your superintendents, there were a number of hearings that were also 2 weeks ago at other districts. And I realize, is there a collective thought, or I know you get together, the large school districts, is there a group or a process or something that can work to say, this is organized chaos and we can't have this?
Yeah, I think one thing that it came out of, there's I know still two, well, one was just had last week, and I think there's one more hearing next week even. But one of the common themes that has emerged through conversation among the superintendents is the lack of information and the lack of adherence to the statutory requirements that have come forward. So I think the lack of the contract on how all of the 18 districts could be bound together or would be bound together is somewhat limiting to us, and I think that's something that we do share as that common interest. So I can't speak on behalf of those other 17 boards or administrations on what direction they're going to go to. But I think after boards have made their decisions, we'll have additional conversations with those superintendents in districts about potential next steps moving forward.
I just have one more question. And back to Susan's point about the Charter School Commission, how do we communicate our thoughts to the commission?
I can give you an overview really of the timeline. Mike's talked a little bit about it. We received the proposal on the 14th of February. And then within 45 days, we were to hold a public hearing, which we did on the 18th. Within 30 days after the hearing, you must vote to grant or deny the charter, which we're scheduled to do on the 15th of April, which again is within the statutory requirement. And then 7 days after your vote, we'll file a report that either approves or denies the charter. We'll begin working on the background and information of that report. It will be filed to the Charter Commission at the conclusion of the discussion. I'll have a sense, based on some of the comments already, of kind of where we're headed. So we'll begin to work on what that report will be. 30 days after that report is submitted, the applicant themselves may appeal to the Charter School Commission. 7 days after that, after the appeal is received, the commission will inform the parties of a date of a hearing regarding the appeal, and that'll occur no more than 45 days after the receipt of the appeal. 30 days after that, within 30 days will be a decision, and then within 35 days after that could be a file for a judicial review. So we're, again, looking at something that potentially is going to take us well into the summer months on a proposal that is being suggested to start on August 14th, which is actually outside of the statutory requirement of when school would start.
So we could spend a lot of money in between the staff time. Yeah.
when you talk about money and resources in terms of staff time, I'd ask our learning services team to stand up back there that have contributed to this, please. So when you add that to the cabinet and the amount of time and energy that has gone into reviewing the proposal, and I think it's important to note that, you know, part of our obligation is to receive the proposal and the application and to give it due diligence and due thought. And the work that you see, I think, in board docs now really represents that. But as this process begins to move forward, you're looking at the amount of resources that are going to need to be used, you know, in terms of responding either way based on the board's decision. So I thank you, Learning Services. You wonderful work.
Well, I certainly echo everybody else's comments. My colleagues have said it all, and so has Dan. I'm not going to pile on, but I do know. But you know, one thing that wasn't mentioned, or I think bears emphasis, is what's really disturbing to me is that they may have been stretched thin 2 weeks ago, but that they couldn't find someone to come now when we clearly made it obvious that we needed more information and we had more questions and we wanted to give them a forum. They didn't even take the time to show up, you know, not even a representative. So very disappointing. I guess we'll, if there's no more comments, we'll close the discussion for today and then discuss it and have a vote in 2 weeks.
I just will note for the board that if I do receive response to questions or additional information from the applicants, I will forward that to you, and we can use that as part of discussion prior to your action on the 15th.
And I just want to thank the staff for all the work they did on collecting the information. It was literally thousands of pages of information, and I read every one. But quite.
But it was,
yeah, it was very impressive, the amount of it, and it was all very factual and verifiable, more importantly.
Our staff put more work into this than I believe the Illinois Virtual Charter School did.
Sad but true. Anything else on that? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next on to the business of the district. Annual hourly rates of pay for 2013-2014 substitutes.
Well, if Carol Hetman will speak to this, this is an annual process we go through in looking at proposed rates of pay for our substitutes, and so there's a couple recommendations for change, and Carol will speak to those.
Thank you. There are two proposed changes to our hourly rates of pay. One is for our substitute health techs, and the other is for our classroom nurses. We are proposing to increase the hourly rate for our health techs by $1 an hour, from $11 to $12 an hour. Our NESPA health techs are currently a Category 5 with a starting rate of $13.75 an hour, and we are proposing to increase our sub-health techs to $12 an hour. And the other proposed increase would be for our classroom nurses. This increase is, again, for $1 an hour more. Starting rate would be $29 an hour versus $28. And after 3 years of experience, it would be, again, up $1. And for the more difficult behaviors, it would be $1 an hour more, up to $31 an hour. This increase would allow us to be more competitive with our neighboring district. Are there any questions?
We'd be looking for action then at the April 15th board meeting.
And the only thing I will say for those that don't have it open in front of them, it's, you know, we mentioned one or the two jobs that are getting $1 raise. There's approximately 20 positions in here that are not getting any raises. So just from a fiscal standpoint, it's once again very conservative. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Next, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education Bob Ross is going to take the lead on this presentation of information to you. But in compliance with school code and the board policy requiring an annual parent-teacher advisory committee on student discipline to meet, there are some recommended. Bob will present to you the findings of that group for your first review on board policy 7.190, student discipline. Bob.
Thank you, Dan.
Yes, that's right. We present that tonight for no action, and we'll look for action at our next meeting of the Board of Education. This year's annual meeting took place on March 11th, 2013, right here in this room. Students, staff, parents, and administrators, as well as Board of Education representatives Mrs. Romberg and Mr. Dennison, participated. The committee was co-chaired by Naperville Central Dean Mike Stock and Naperville North Dean Jackie DeCipio, both of whom are here in this room in case we have any questions tonight. I direct your attention to page 3 of 9 in board docs. What you have in front of you is the existing discipline policy, 7.190, and the committee reviewed the entire policy. And we sent the policy to committee members in advance. They had the opportunity to review it. Then we went through it section by section that night. There was only one proposed change that the committee talked about and came to consensus on, and that's what we present to you tonight. On page 3 of 9, under classification 1, you'll find a new number 3. It's in blue font on your screen, and it reads, off-campus violation. Once students arrive on campus, they must remain on campus until the end of their scheduled day, unless authorized or approved by the building or district administration. This is actually the state of things now. This is true. Once students arrive, let's say at Naperville Central in the morning on the bus, they may not walk to the gas station. They may not walk to downtown and do other things at a time when their parents believe they're under the care of our school, and that is not permitted today. The committee thought, and the administrators thought, that our students, some of our students could benefit from us making that very clear in our policy. So we thought it was a good idea to codify what is already the current state of things, and that's what's recommended in this language here. We had some good discussion. The wording was a little different as proposed. Some of the students on the committee and parents had some ideas about why there might be times maybe someone would go at 5:30 in the morning for practice, right? We have some athletes who do that, and what if they were allowed to go home, and might our language be too tight? So with their advice and with their input, we adjusted the wording. The wording might appear a little clumsy. We actually took it from elsewhere in the same policy. We tried to match the same language. So the committee felt very good about the wording of that, and we present that to you for your consideration. I'd like to see if you have any questions about that, and then there's another piece of something we did at that meeting I'd like to share with you. But for now, I'd like to see if you have any questions about what I've raised so far. Okay, thanks. Thank you. I'd also like to share with you, if I may, that at Mr. Bridges' request, the committee did read and consider a letter written by a Naperville North student who had visited this Board of Education a couple of months ago. And that student requested that this Board of Education alter the dress code as it currently exists to allow him and others to wear things such as a shirt advocating the legalization of marijuana. Mr. Bridges asked that when this committee met, this would be a good time for us to get some input. So I want to report to you that the committee read the letter. Again, they had that in advance. We discussed it that night. Several comments from the committee about how well-reasoned the letter was, how legitimate it was for this student to raise this issue. However, parents, students, and staff on the committee agreed that the strong anti-drug message that our schools attempt to provide is something that our students, parents, and staff expect the school to provide. And they were concerned that the wearing of such a shirt was contrary to that message and likely to be read as advocacy for drug use. And the committee was concerned about that. The committee agreed that the board should not change the dress code as this student had suggested, no matter how well-written his letter was, that at the end of the day, making the changes that he suggested was not something the committee wanted to recommend. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions about that, or I know Mike and Jackie are in the back of the room too.
And just follow up on this, Bob, Mike and Jackie, thank you so much. They really drew the parents and students out in this conversation, and there are 30 people sitting in this room around a table, and the students are there with their parents, and some are parents without students. It's quite a mixture. But in these couple of situations, they take it very, very seriously and don't just say, well, this is the proposal and what next, thinking we're going to get out quickly. That's not the case. And thank you, Mike and Jackie, for running that so effectively, really trying to draw the students out was to show all sides and make sure all sides were presented. So thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Very straightforward once again. Thank you very much.
So again, we'll be asking for board action at the April 15th meeting. The next item is again, also our annual policy requiring a review of the co-curricular participation code. Again, Mr. Ross has the honor of working with some administrators in this district on reviewing this policy. So Bob, if you want to introduce and then speak to the recommendations from this committee.
Thank you. This is a different committee with a similar task, and that is to review our co-curricular code. In this case, the Board of Education representatives were Mr. Jensch and Mrs. Romberg. This year, the meeting was held on February 25th, 2013 at Naperville North High School. Naperville North Athletic Director Jim Conrad and Naperville Central Athletic Director Andy Lutzenkirchen served as the co-chairs of that committee. In board docs, you'll see reflected the work that the committee did. I'd call your attention to page 3 of 4 of the policy, and you'll see that under letter A, the committee proposes eliminating the part that reads, attendance, a participant who violates number 6 above and for whom there is deemed sufficient proof of non-use, and this is, the reader will see that non-use is referring here to alcohol or drugs. Shall be suspended for 1 contest or 1 week, whichever is appropriate for the sportive activity. And similarly, that we would strike the part that says a second attendance has the same consequence as a first offense involving consumption. The idea here is that attending a party where drugs and alcohol are being served would continue to be a violation as it is today. Okay? What this section was kind of a list of a special consequence if we believed and could almost prove that a student had attended a party where drugs and alcohol were being consumed, but hadn't participated. What happens now is that sometimes parents seem to think, and I can tell already, I'm going to ask Mr. Conrad and Mr. Lutzenkirchen to make their way to the presentation table. Why don't you come on up, gentlemen? They'll be able to give you some specifics. What'll sometimes happen is that when a student is reported for an incident like this, unlike how it used to work, sometimes now it's almost as if some families believe that the burden of proof is to fall on these gentlemen to prove my child was drinking, to prove my child, you weren't there, you didn't see me, to take a picture, and to prove that. And that was not the intent when that exception to the normal rule went into place, and we're concerned about that. And I'm going to ask Mr. Conrad to expound on that a little.
Yep, good. The issue we've had is that when we have a student come into our offices who's been found at a party, oftentimes the parents will say, well, I can trot 5 or 6 students in who can verify that my son or daughter wasn't drinking. It's really a bad situation to be in when we start putting students against students to prove who's drinking, who's not drinking. And the bigger issue is that we don't feel like it's good for our kids to be in a situation where other kids are drinking or using drugs. And that in the past we've had situations where there are 4 cases of beer, 6 bottles of booze, and when the police come, no one was drinking. And that then causes a huge, witch hunt, and that we're looking at kids are saying who drank, who didn't drink. This cleans up the code. I think, what we really want is for our kids not to be around these sorts of influences, and eliminates the after effect of parent asking us to consider reducing a punishment when we don't really know who used and who didn't use.
I was at the conversation. I thought it was a great conversation, and it was very clear that everybody supported it. The one question I had is, how much flexibility do you have if, for a situation where a kid gets a call from 3 of his friends who are drunk and says, hey, can you come by, pick us up? We don't want to drive. And he shows up to pick him up. Would that be covered here, or would you have the flexibility to take that into account?
In all cases, we have the code is the code. So I wouldn't say the flexibility to not follow the code, but I think the code allows for that. If a student was at the party, hanging out at the party with his friends and drove him, then he would be subject to the code. if the student never went to the party but came to help someone or came to a party, saw that there was alcohol, left immediately, and happened to get
That
tripped
would
up
be
by
the
the
other
police on the
example.
way, that student would also be, we would have the discretion to say, you weren't violating the code, so
Okay.
you won't be subject to it.
No, I mean, I think that would be the only question people might have. So, you know, if you're sitting there watching everybody do whatever, you know, then you're participating.
Mr. Bridges, Mr. Yedge, the other change that's in board docs is in the other document that you have. We have a table that lists the athletic events and activities. The code applies not only to athletics but also to activities. And also in blue, we're suggesting an addition. I think since the last time this was revised, we've added robotics team and show choir, and needed to place those clubs and the proper consequence were a student in there to violate the code. And so you'll see that those have been added to the table as well. And if there's no questions about that, there is something I'd like to speak to the board about that came up at that committee meeting. And I'd like the board to keep in mind that one of the purposes for the code is to assist students, and we want to help students in many ways. One way is to serve as a deterrent for making bad decisions, especially bad decisions at all. But we're talking now about bad decisions about substance use. Those on the committee, some on the committee, expressed that they did not believe that this part of the co-curricular code was working as well as it could. Indeed, one student said plainly, in kind of a way that was clearly a student talking to adults, said, we students don't necessarily sit around and say, oh, gee, I better not do that or I'll be in violation of the co-curricular code. I guess we'd kind of like it if they did. But that told us that at that moment, in that case, and we think in other cases, the code isn't always acting as the deterrent that we'd like it to. And there was discussion about what else could the school district do to help students to make decisions that we would want them to make it easier for them to make a good, solid decision. And the idea that surfaced, and we are a very long way from recommending this, or we haven't even yet considered all of the angles, but the idea that surfaced was the idea of drug testing, of mandatory drug testing, random, not every student, not every day, not every time, but to develop a system that would allow those who are covered by the code to know that they could be, much like is done in many workplaces, that they could be tested. And that perhaps an advantage of that would be that might help a student to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to make this choice. Because if I did, I could get caught and I might get tested, and that this might be something to help students, to fortify students as they go forward to make good decisions. There's obviously a great deal to consider. There's legal angles. There's 1,000 different angles that we can think of, and we would like to try to explore those. We'd like to consult with our attorneys. I've already asked our athletic directors to contact other districts who are already doing this, find out what's working, what's not working, what are the problems they've faced, is it worth it, what have you learned? We'd like to go ahead and continue to research that and to come back to you at a later date with a report and possibly a recommendation. But I wanted to let you know and put on your radar that that's something that did come up in that committee, and it's an idea I think that's worthy of our exploration.
Our intent in terms of looking at a board prep calendar would be the June 17th meeting to have a conversation, not be prepared necessarily for a recommendation at that time. This is not something at this point we're looking to recommend for next year, but the conversation then would continue more formally with this board based on conversation you may have now at the June 17th meeting.
Is this something you're going to go back to the parents and have a conversation with them as well?
The initial work, as Bob said, these two gentlemen are going to be charged with getting us some information about some of our other districts and just kind of the who's doing it, how are you doing it, the costs associated with it, the potential pitfalls. I think it's important to realize, and maybe Jim or Andy can speak to this a little bit, there is a form of drug testing that is already in place for student athletes through the Illinois High School Association. I believe once student athletes have reached the regional or the playoff level, is it just state series?
No, it started. The IHSA would test varsity athletes only,
at the state series, starting at the regional level. Now, they've started where they can test them at any time throughout the season, at the varsity level only. So it's not all your athletes.
But is that for steroids or is it for?
PEDs is what they're testing for, yes.
Performance
enhancing drug.
Okay, but not for alcohol or marijuana or anything else like that?
No.
And that would be my next question. What would you screen for? I mean, there's two types. There's a 5-panel and 7-panel. What are some of the common drugs you think we should be looking for, or in that regard?
Well, we've had over 30 violations this year at North, and 24 of them were for marijuana. So obviously, marijuana has to be on the panel. That would be our biggest concern.
So is it fair to say that, I mean, I was not a member of the committee, but the conversation focused more around recreational drugs as opposed to the performing enhancing. At this point,
very
knowing
much
that screening for performing enhancing drugs is already in place for our varsity athletes, right? Okay.
And then I just got another curious question, maybe going beyond the scope of the conversation right now. But so if you discovered that these students were on some sort of drugs, what's the next step beyond that? What would you look at as opposed to just turning them over to some sort of law enforcement?
I know for me, when we had this discussion on the 25th, that was my question. What do we do with a positive test? And looking at the code now, it's a reactive code. And what are we doing proactively? I think this is a way for us to be proactive. And Jim and I have had discussions. In fact, before we came in the room, we were having this discussion. What and how will we use this if a positive test? And that's an ongoing discussion, which we really just don't have an answer for yet.
Yeah, because I don't think I could support anything other than giving them help and trying to get them some benefit from it as opposed to some other action. That's got to be the first course, is give them some help.
If I may, Mr. Conrad, would you talk a little bit about now, if a student, let's say an athlete, the 24 cases you talked about, is there something other than disciplinary consequences? What else happens in a situation like that, whether we were to learn about it through testing or through other ways?
About 6 or 7 years ago, this committee added the piece where the student had to go have an assessment done. And that was done so that the family could get educated on maybe some ways to help their student. So there is obviously the punishment piece, the missing games or events, but there's also an additional piece where they had to go sit down with a certified drug and alcohol counselor, have a meeting, the parents meet, and the counselor then suggests to the family, we believe that your child would benefit from this. That could be a couple-week seminar type thing. It could be your child needs to be sent away to get some more serious assistance. And then it was up to the family to follow through with that. So we did put that piece as an additional help piece as opposed to just slapping the kid with games.
I don't know if I agree or disagree at this point, but, it seems everything from kindergarten to, what we're talking about here, the line between parenting and what the school does blurs so much. What were your thoughts on that when you discussed that?
Well, there's some people would say we should get rid of the code altogether and leave this up to the parents. The issue is if your football quarterback, everyone in school knows is smoking marijuana, and this takes your team, it just makes our school, our district look bad. Our biggest concern is the pressure on kids is pretty severe now. Marijuana is rampant in the schools. And if there's anything we can do to assist parents and assist the kids to say no, I think it's a positive thing. One thing that's come through this committee is that parents have said year after year, I like the fact that when my child leaves the house, I can say to them, now remember, if something happens tonight, you won't be able to play your games for the next couple of weeks. The parents said it helps take some of the it helps me with the responsibility of making my kid make the right decisions. And this would just be another layer to that.
My other question was, you were so forthcoming in sharing kind of what was going on at North, and I hate for one school to be, vilified and the other doesn't say anything. So I just really, our schools are pretty equal in everything that they do. Having these having these high achieving kids, and I'm proud of how well we match up in so many cases. So I hate to see one kind of vilified and the other one get off like there's nothing going on.
Oh, that's not the case, and we have the same issue. Marijuana is running rampant, and some of it is right before they come to school in the morning. So it's not just the weekend parties; it's every day of the week now. And again, I go back to my comment, trying to be more proactive than reactive.
Just a question I had. Was there discussion at the committee level about, we're picking on athletics right now, would the drug testing be activities and clubs as well?
Yes.
Yes. Just in, okay, don't get too far again. Yep. I know you're just beginning collecting information for us, but okay.
Do coaches or at school, I mean, you know, I understand that marijuana has a fairly pungent smell. So if somebody's coming in and it should be very clear to smell it, I understand. What is there at that point? Is there something that could be done
Yes, I would hope that our athletes or activities aren't showing up for their events under the influence. But we have had at Info North in the last 2 months, we had a case where 4 of our activities kids came into school under the influence. The teacher did smell it on them, and that's what caused the wheels to start turning, and those kids were out of their activities for a while. So if it is recognized, then we do deal with it. But the problem is they're doing it after practice often too. We can't.
And if a coach suspects that there's some activity, what tools does that coach have to deal with that?
The coach can call the kid in, obviously, and speak to the child one-on-one. They can call the family in and have a conversation. And both schools have, fantastic student service departments where you can contact a social worker and ask the social worker to have a contact with that child. The code does allow for a student to come forward and, without anyone knowing about their problem, to say, I have a problem. I've been using, I need help. That student is not punished by the code, but then is granted assistance and are allowed to get assistance without being punished. So we do have that to help those kids.
And what if a positive test result, that's something that could follow them for a long period of time, couldn't it? I mean, once you have that, does it get reported to the police? Does it become something that is a matter of record?
I think just we're kind of getting a little bit farther than
know.
where they've done their work right now.
Right.
And I think that's some of what we're going to have to ask them to look at and get information for us on what some other districts that are doing. There are districts in the state of Illinois that are implementing drug testing policies and practices right now. So I think that's part of what the conversation would have to be once we understand what the kind of what some of the practices are, what the pitfalls are, what the advantages are to it. I think what I'm hearing in terms of conversation, too, is it's a broader conversation, maybe, that we need to have as a board and as a community. It's about not just our student athletes or those in our activities, but services and supports we have available in our schools for students who may have problems. We had a report last year from our 2 directors of student services at the 2 high school about the numbers of hospitalizations, not just for drug abuse and use, but for a number of factors. And maybe that may be a worthwhile conversation that we have to inform the Board of Education about supports that we have in place, the many supports we have in place in all of our schools for our students who have such challenges. So we'll look at scheduling at that at some point.
Yeah, I think we need to look at it as the supports and tools for our faculty and administrators to have to deal with it. Some tools are a blunter instrument than others. And we'd like to have more finely tuned instruments, I think, than blunt ones. But
and again, I sat in this meeting, and Jim and Andy, I just want everyone to understand this is just not this particular situation that's come up about the possibility of looking into drug testing and just getting a little bit smarter on it. You go to these meetings, and you both know as athletic directors, you prepare and you get what you think is a real representative sample of parents and kids and faculty members and board members. You get this whole group together. You really don't know what's going to come out of it. And interesting, who's going to bring it up? That's what I find. Who's going to bring up the fact that that this needs to be looked at and needs to be investigated. So thank you both for being patient with the big groups that are there and drawing them out, because that's the richness of that evening. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo those remarks. One thing, I was also there, and one thing that struck me was once it came up, how strongly everybody in the room felt that we needed to be, as you've said many times, more proactive. And it was actually, I'm not that naive, but I was surprised how prevalent not only the administrators thought the drug problem was, but how prevalent the students said it was. That he said, yeah, if you want Coke, you know who to go to. If you want If you want heroin, you know who to go to. If you want pot, you know who to go to. And that, I mean, once again, I don't live with my head in the sand, but I was shocked that we have that kind of culture. I know there's been a lot of discussions in the community about that, especially from the heroin angle. I'm not saying that that's where we're thinking or anybody's thinking about going, but it was sobering. And I've also had a little chance to reflect on it since the meeting was a week or so ago. And the one thing, you know, I couldn't agree more with, well, pretty much what everybody said. The more I look at it, it's a tool, and for me, it would be a tool for the parent first and foremost, with our support. I don't know what the privacy issues are, if we can keep something like this private, and we're going to discuss that, I know, but I'm just sharing the thoughts that as I've reflected on it, you know, if there is a way we can help parents in this, and you know, there's plenty of parents that cut pieces of hair and send it in right now. If there's a way we can help that and help the kids and help our community, something we can look at, and that's where we are right now. So, but appreciate that group for having the courage to discuss it and bring it up and discuss it so openly. So we'll see where it goes, and I'm sure we'll get some parent feedback on it in some way pretty soon. So, and not to get away from the rest of the student co-curricular code, just want to make sure, were there any other comments or questions on the other items? Thank you so much.
So again, on the 15th, looking for action from the Board of Education on those two items that are contained within the current code, which Mr. Ross alluded to. So, and then June 17th, we'll set as a tentative date to continue the conversation with hopefully some information from our athletic directors. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to shift into some learning services presentations. Dr. Hester, I think, is going to come to the presentation table initially, and I think Jane Willard is with her for this one, or for all three of them. So they will present to you in succession 3 different reports, high school course recommendations, followed by resource recommendations and curriculum recommendations. Dr. Hester.
Good evening, everyone. Before we begin, as Mr. Burgess said, we have 3 presentations this evening, 3 recommendations, but there was a lot of collaborative work that went into all 3 of these. So I just want to take a moment to recognize all of the individuals, whose time and talents contributed to what we're bringing forward tonight. First of all, with the new courses, I really want to recognize the work of all of the high school ICs at both North and Central, our instructional coordinators, and all of the leadership that they provided with their departments to come to the recommendations. And then I absolutely have to mention the leadership of Jackie Thornton and Jeff Howard and the work that they do to lead those ICs. Moving forward, when we take a look at the resources, and the curriculum. I have to start by, we're bringing forward resources and curriculum for kindergarten this evening, and I'd like to recognize the work of all the kindergarten teachers in the district, whether they'll be teaching half-day or full-day next year. They've all participated, and leadership from the learning services team and the elementary principals to make that possible. I'd like to recognize the work of the literacy curriculum development team, who is responsible for the resources and the curriculum, Jeff Howard and Jackie Thornton for their participation with communication arts, and then recognizing the work of the entire learning services team toward that. And last but not least, we could not have gotten this work done without collaborating with assessment and analytics, without collaborating with instructional technology, and operations, and also pupil services. So I have to say that everything coming forward was really a joint effort. So with that, I'm going to start with our new course proposals and course title changes. We have 5 courses that are being recommended this evening, and these recommendations are coming forward from a course audit process that was led with Learning Services and with Jackie Thornton and Jeff Howard. And in that process, all of the ICs led their departments in looking at whether our current courses had endurance, whether they had the leverage to provide learning in other areas, whether they were relevant for kids in today's time, and then whether they would provide them with readiness, and that's readiness for the next step of learning. So with that, we are presenting 5 courses. The first is Culinary Arts and Nutrition 3, which extends our Culinary Arts and Nutrition 1 and 2. That course will be offered at Central, but will be, because of facilities, but will be provided for both students at North and Central. For the art department, we are proposing that we add sculpture so that we can expand our 3D options and opportunities. In mathematics, we already offer pre-calculus, but looking at that concept of readiness and endurance, we are proposing that we bring another course called business pre-calculus, so that can add to the experience that our students can have. In the social studies, we are hoping to add a capstone course that allows and really helps our students with fulfilling that mission in being self-directed learners. And lastly, as we've been offering Chinese as a language at our high schools, it's time to add another course that allows students to extend past that AP opportunity. So those are the 5 courses that we're recommending this evening. And then if I could move on to the title changes. The title changes are also a result of that course audit process. The first group of title changes that you see on page 2 are really a result that help us more accurately represent the content and the concepts and the themes of the course as we move forward. And then if we look at all of the course title changes for art and then music, if I can start with art, the title changes are really just to bring consistency and understanding in what we offer and make it more understandable for parents and students as they select the courses. When we look at music, and those start on page 6, the music recommendations, the ones primarily for band and orchestra, we have had inconsistency between our 2 high schools in the naming of the courses. And for example, in some instances, a freshman course at Central might be a senior level name course at North. And so through the course audit process, we are proposing that we change the name structure to what you see on the document. And we feel that that will help, number one, with bringing consistency between our 2 schools and clarifying some of the issues with titles. We also feel that it will support greatly our freshmen, our incoming students, our parents, and college admission counselors in actually understanding the progressions. We did note earlier today that we had confused some of the old titles and moved them around. And we're hoping that even the new titles help us in understanding that progression and sequence. So that document has been updated. So that concludes the recommendation for the new courses and the course title changes. At this time, we'd like to honor any questions that the board has.
When you look at some of these classes, like where it says like photo 4, we have 2, 3, and 4 now. Like those were kind of the biggest changes. I'm looking on page number 5, just as an example. That was like really the biggest changes. You know, it just, we talk about grade inflation, all of a sudden it feels like name inflation on these. So
on some of these?
Yeah.
I think it's just so that we have consistency. There were incidences where a student could take a 1 in the old nomenclature, and then that would not necessarily be a freshman class. So what this is doing is creating consistency in the numbering as we move forward.
So then you have like for photography, for example, you have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 now, whereas 2, that was on page 5 in the middle.
What it does is it allows part of the course audit process asks the instructional coordinators to identify strands, so that if a student actually wanted to not only study in that discipline, but study within a strand, that they would have the option to follow through. So instead of just creating more courses and levels, it's actually for the purpose that you can follow through with a photo strand, that you can follow through with a digital art strand. the whole way through, so that you don't just take 1 and 2 of one course and then you jump to another strand within the sequence. So students could still do that if they wanted to, but they can also actually specialize in a particular area.
So then there would be a photography 1, a photography 2, a photography 3, and a photography 4?
There could.
Is that what you expect? Because you changed 2 to 4, and I just was curious where 3 was. Those kinds of. Do you know what I'm saying?
I'll have to go back and look at the total
Okay.
sequence so that I can answer that correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, but that is the purpose, is so that a student could follow through with a strand. Okay. Any others? Okay.
No other questions? Okay.
Okay. All right, then we'll move ahead with the resources. And what we've put up on the screen is the Excel workbook that has all the resources that we're bringing forward. But what I want to do is just give a general overview. We are bringing forward resources for kindergarten. And in kindergarten, we had already updated the math resources. But for literacy, we are bringing resources for reading, for writing, for word study, for handwriting, and for assessment, and that's a diagnostic assessment. We are also recommending resources for grades 1 through 8 that include handwriting is actually kindergarten and grade 1 only. That diagnostic assessment would carry through from kindergarten to 8th grade. And then we are recommending resources for dual language, which are the resources for the 6th grade course at Jefferson. In addition to that, we are bringing forward resources for academic support, for communication arts and career and technical education, and social studies. So what I want to do is just walk through just the tabs on the Excel. The first one is for kindergarten, so that brings forth the reading, writing, word study, handwriting, and an assessment for kindergarten. On the second tab, that's sort of the conglomeration of resources for grades 1 through 8. So that has the handwriting, the assessment, and the dual language. On the next tab is basically we entitled that additional resources. So is that the one you're on? I'm sorry, she's on. Okay, so let's go with ComArts, English 1, 2, and 3. These are the resources that accompany the course proposals that we brought forward in the fall for English 1, 2, and 3. All of the resources there will be used for English 1, 2, and 3, English 1 and 2 honors, English 2 journalism, and English 2 journalism honors. In terms of those resources, that tab refers to any resources that are collections or anthologies from publishers. So, those are ones that you might find from a McGraw-Hill, a Bedford, or so on. The next tab is entitled High School Extended Text. Those are also all ComArts resources. And with the new curriculum for ComArts, and also consistent with the Common Core standards and with the PARCC assessment, in our curriculum, we will have all high school students in their courses reading 1 extended text per quarter, or you could say 2 per semester. An extended text, we used to just say novels, but what it really means is any text that is an entire text, and they are considered to be longer text. So that is what that list entails. And then the last one then is the additional high school resources, which has the resources for academic support, the career and technical education, and social studies. I think it's important to know that all of the resources have been evaluated by either a curriculum committee or by the teachers in the department teaching that course. In addition, we've given all, whether you're on the committee or not, all teachers had the opportunity to review it with evaluation criteria. This is the first read of the recommendations for adoption of resources. The second reading will be at our next board meeting on April 15th. And then all instructional resources will be posted on the district website for public review prior to the adoption, and then the approved list will be available on the website after approval. So what questions can we answer with the resources?
What do you do with the old books?
We actually try to sell those as much as possible. So oftentimes we work with Follett. We do collect the resources, and we do make attempts to sell them.
And if you can't sell them, do you give them away to other districts, or do you destroy them?
We give them away.
We usually work with organizations that we will donate, but when we look at English 1, 2, and 3, we are not taking out everything that they currently have in their classrooms. Our committee worked very hard to evaluate what do they currently value in their classrooms that they can see moving forward, and these are additional. So that's something to remember, that this is not wiping out all of the resources that they currently have in the classrooms. These are additional resources that they identified that would support new curriculum.
And then some of these books that I see listed are ones that I know we've personally paid for when our student has signed up for a class. You know, I can name 6 of these that I see around my house this year. And I'm curious, what differentiates the purchasing of them for this group, or the purchasing of them personally?
So that's one thing that I didn't mention that's important is we are, one of the things we want with our in our ComArts classes is that students have the ability to annotate on text, and so that means that once they annotate, basically take them away with them. So what we'd like to do that's new in the future is $30 of a student's purchases of the extended text will come from the student fees or course fees, and then $10 will be come out of a running budget from learning services in the future. So that addresses that we will actually be treating them like consumables and replenishing those resources. To the other part of your question of, I've seen some of these, what we are working off of is the approved resource list that we have from all of the board adoptions that have taken place. So we took that resource, we took that list, and then looked at all the resources that the teachers matched to their instructional units and said, okay, we don't need to take those forward. And then we took any text that was not on that currently approved list, and we'll be bringing that forward. So you may have seen a book at home that either came from the library or from our LRC, or you may have seen a book that a teacher chose to use with one student, a couple students, but was not one that was used widespread with small groups or with every student.
Sometimes they give them a list and they can pick kind of
yes.
which one of several.
Yes, so it could have come from a list as well. Another thing that I did not mention as well is that all the resources that you see tonight will be purchased with existing funds from this fiscal year.
And did you say that these books are going to, in the past we've had them at the library, did I miss you say that?
No, there's some, there are some of the books that you've seen at home that are on this list may not have been approved for widespread instruction, but it may have been that, either it's a book that you saw that was actually signed out from the LRC, or it's a book that you purchased off of a list.
So the ones that are going to be for everyone, where did you say they're going to be available? Because the community's had an opportunity to look at our textbooks before, and I just would, and hardly anyone ever, I think over 8 years we've had 4 people, or 5 people, except for one instance, take a peek at them.
Yeah, they'll be posted, the list of resources will be posted on the internet and available for review upon request. It's compliant with board policy 6210, that the list is available.
And do we have all the books? Is there a reason we wouldn't have them at the library?
We have one copy of all of the books. Okay. From my understanding, the practice of providing 3 copies of every, having a copy here and then 2 at the libraries was actually consistent when Illinois textbook loans existed. And so one of the things we did was review board policy and review Illinois school code. What we didn't want to do was purchase a bunch of books that would not be approved as well. So, and also because we're using the course fee structure, what we're trying to do is be responsive to the students that sit in front of a teacher. So we have an extensive list here that are approved, have been evaluated with tools that teachers can select from versus saying, we're going to pre-select all our resources before the kids sit in front of us. So we're trying to match text to students, and that is why we're not buying them all now or making them all available. So as requested, we can make the resources available for somebody to review. Okay?
I just had a question, I think, for my colleagues more than for the presentation, and that is, so we have this course fee of $30 per student, and we've often talked about, how do we reduce fees for this, free education, this free public education? How do we balance having these charges, which I understand the richness of this programming, but I didn't go back and look to see with communication arts and or what will be English 1, 2, and 3. What are the charges? But you take $30 on top of what the charge is right now, and that gets pretty hefty. So that's a totally different discussion, and that's where do we go with fees. So, but I also didn't want to leave this discussion without saying we probably need to all get on the same page on that.
And so one thing, after all the questions are asked that I wanted to close with, but I'll do it now, is that we are also actively exploring digital content. We weren't ready to do that yet because not all of the companies are ready to do that and support us. So we will have a pilot that will take place even by the end of this school year. We're working with companies that provide those types of services, but that leads us into a land where we actually have to have an ongoing budget to support the purchasing of any text that we would buy that our students would access on devices. So that would be for future conversation as well.
And that could be more pricey.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's fine.
I just wanted to say, these are regular English classes. These are not the honors English classes. These are regular level.
They're for all of the levels.
All the levels.
Right.
This is an incredibly, this looks like a college reading list. We've got our kids reading some extraordinary books and giving them such an advantage. And I love that we're incorporating nonfiction in there as well. I mean, there's so much rich nonfiction that provides such great insights, and I just think it is a phenomenal list. I'm so impressed. There's diversity, there's gender diversity, there's cultural diversity. It's just a phenomenal list. I'm very impressed. I know, I love it. Freakonomics, awesome.
Actually, I was going to ask this anyway, but just to piggyback on Jackie was asking, the way I read it, for the kindergarten, the elementary school, and junior high, you had it broken down for one-time purchases and consumables.
Mm-hmm.
When you went to English 1, 2, and 3 resources, it didn't spell that out, and if you said it, I'm sorry. But that $400,000 is a one-time purchase, right?
Yes.
Those are going to be the texts that are reused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way I understand the fees is the fee for, let's say, English 1 is not for the textbooks. It's for these consumables that you have under extended text, right?
Right.
I just want to make sure I got
Right.
it all straight.
Mm-hmm.
So, because it didn't say one-time purchase there, and I
Right.
was pretty sure it was. Okay. Got it.
All right. Okay. And then with that, we'll move over to Jane with the curriculum.
We are here tonight to recommend that the board approve the English Language Arts curriculum for kindergarten through 11th grade. We also are here to ask that the board approve the kindergarten curriculum for mathematics. The approval of the curriculum will allow us to implement English 1, 2, and 3 for the 2013-14 school year, and also upgrade our kindergarten curriculum in both math and English language arts. This curriculum supports the new courses that we brought forward to you in the fall. This also supports our phase 4 of our curriculum development process, which is the implementation phase. If you look at the board docs that we gave you, you will see that we have curriculum maps available for your review. In the past, our curriculum design framework was an understanding by design. As we write new curriculum, we are upgrading to a curriculum mapping design, which actually is developed straight from the standards. During curriculum development, there are different maps that are developed through our curriculum teams. The first map is that process map. That's the draft the teams work as they create initial curriculum. The second level map is the year-long map. That's the map that you will be reviewing for approval. That is a community level map, and the entire staff will have access to these maps for the specific curriculums that we're developing. Then our teams go in and they develop core unit maps. Those are specific to the grade levels and the content. That is where our teachers will do their daily planning from. So I'm going to focus on the year-long map that's up in board docs right now. If you look at these year-long maps, they are all structured with the exact same elements. In the header, you will see that the grade level or course is clearly identified, also the content area. In the header, there is also the resources that are board approved, and then any common district assessments that are identified as well. The next piece are the standards. When we develop curriculum currently right now for English language arts and math, we are using the Common Core State Standards. Those are clearly identified, and then what our teams have done is broken that into the content and skills. Content being what students need to know and be able to do, along with the skills. The last column is the academic vocabulary. This has been developed K-12. There's a progression of sophistication that goes into this vocabulary, and this vocabulary is central to understanding the concepts within the given academic discipline. I'm going to highlight the kindergarten changes and in math and in English language arts. When we look at math for kindergarten, there's going to be two sets of standards that are unique, which are the content standards and also the mathematical practice standards. The students will engage in both of these on a daily basis. When we look at the content standards, our kindergarten students will engage in counting, addition and subtraction, measurement and data, and geometry. When we look at the mathematical practices, these are how they understand mathematics. This is that application. One big shift for our math this year as we move forward is really the balance of that procedural fluency with the application of content. As you look at the kindergarten curriculum for English language arts, all kindergarten students will engage in a systematic sequence of early literacy skills involving print concepts, phonemic awareness, phonics, and word recognition and fluency. There will be a shift for kindergarten this year when we look at balance of informational text and literary text, and all of our kindergarten students will be readers and writers of text by the end of the year. When we look at communication arts curriculum, which involves English 1, 2, and 3, we have developed the curriculum to make sure all of our students are college and career ready. You will notice, and we've touched base on the fact that there is more fiction and nonfiction. I think it's very evident within the text selections that we're recommending. High school students will also engage in a balance of long and short text. Another shift is that integration of the strands. We will integrate reading, writing, speaking, and listening and vocabulary into each course rather than having those be standalone. Students will continue to engage in rich discussion, authentic writing experiences, and these courses were developed on a year-long continuum, which is another shift. Those are the recommendations that we're putting forward this evening, and we highlighted English 1, 2, and 3 in kindergarten because those are the courses and grade levels that will be fully implemented in the 2013-14 school year.
And then whatever questions you have about curriculum.
So if our kindergartners are reading and writing proficient at the end of kindergarten, how do we help the half-day kindergartners in the 7 schools?
We're,
Or will they be as well?
yes. Yeah, we have our reading and math curriculum are the same for half day and for full day. It's just the delivery and then the time for extended application of concepts.
The only question I had was, it was actually in your summary here, which kind of caught me by surprise, where you say, when you're talking about math curriculum, curriculum for grades 1 through 12 did not require substantial revisions to meet the Common Core state standards. It wasn't that long ago, I remember administrators, or at least one administrator going, second grade math is going to become first grade math, third grade math is going to become second grade math, and so on. So did we read this in more depth, or what happened?
I think that was the initial gut reaction by many districts. And when we really sat down and unpacked the Common Core, we realized we were more aligned than we first initially thought when we saw the Common Core. And so when we look at our curriculums, we've absolutely upgraded and made the shifts where we've needed to make them, but it's not a clear, everything has shifted a grade level up. We feel like we were in a very good position with our curriculum, that we did have to upgrade in certain areas, but it was not a complete overhaul.
So there were upgrades, because I remember the Common
Yes.
Core, was more specific in a lot of expectations and requirements. So
We
those
have-
changes were made.
Right, those changes we're making, but they're not as significant as our kindergarten changes, which is why we did not present those right now.
So would it be safe to say, or is it an oversimplification, that the biggest change is that hopefully our first graders will be more prepared when they do enter first grade, even though there may be some more richness to what they're learning, but the basic expectations are about the same and that we have been?
There are some expectations that are greater than in the past, but not a huge amount that would cause for any great alarm. I think our teachers are very prepared. I think what we'll see is a shift in instruction and going deeper within our concepts that we currently have. But for all new concepts in first grade, no, we are in a great position that we will have our students prepared.
That's very reassuring, because some people were, the sky is falling, and I'm glad to hear that our district was not that far behind, so very good. I appreciate that.
We're in a good place.
Anything else?
No.
Oh, very nice.
Thank you.
You're looking for action on all three of those topics at the April 15th board meeting. And then the last item on the discussion without action, we'll go back to Mr. Ross and then Dr. Foley. In March, Ms. Ryan presented to you the elementary staffing projections, as well as Mr. Ross with the junior high school. And then we're back this evening to provide the Board of Education with an overview of our high school special education certified staffing projections for the coming school year. So, Bob?
Thank you. Yes, that's right. We are projecting that high school enrollment be close to flat. We're projecting down about 55 students out of about 6,000. Our staffing plan and loaded in board docs tonight represents no increase in staff. Actually would have been slightly down. We added one more special education teacher that helped us in a couple of places. But after all the numbers are in and out, we come to you tonight with a proposal for the same number of teachers at the high school level for next year as we have in the current year.
As far as special education staff, from year to year, students can fluctuate. We've had an increase of students coming into our district, and they've been coming in with more significant needs, visual impairment, blindness, high levels of autism, very complex speech and language and behavioral issues. So the requests are for that, the speech and language pathologist, visual impaired teacher, and part of that is the assistive technology specialist. We currently have one and a couple that are half and half, and with the amount of students who are coming in with very significant language needs and learning needs, the assistive technology need has also risen.
I feel like I just have a lot of questions tonight. I'm sorry. On special education, Kate, I just wanted, it says district level. Am I reading that right? Those are employees that will be at the district level?
Right. All of our staff are district employees, and based on where the student need is, that's where they're assigned. So we don't hire a building staff.
District level is not referring to a district administrator.
Okay,
It's-
see, I thought there were three different.
No.
It's interesting you say there are all these needs, but yeah,
Right.
I understand
Yeah,
now. There-
these
It's
are
not, we don't have more associate directors.
No.
That
These
are
are
being
certified
hired.
staff.
Got it.
Right. Speech and language pathologists, visually impaired teachers.
I understand the.
Yeah.
They're at a district
It's just
level.
at the district level,
I
right?
understand.
Right. And a lot are coming in from the early childhood center and coming into the kindergarten now and beyond.
Yeah, it'd be pretty crowded downstairs.
I was
but-
going to say that it's already pretty crowded downstairs.
Are there any other questions?
I just, we have, and this has been an issue that's come up with a stable to slightly shrinking population. There's an expectation that we would be able to, decline teachers as well, or educators that we have when we could. In some cases, we've increased our programming. All-day kindergarten is going to require more teachers, and in special education, these are requirements that we have based on the needs that come to us. So where we can, we have. And where we can't, we haven't.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that provides that challenge, and I just wanted to make that explicit.
Anything else? Well, that concludes the discussion without action. We don't have anything for action tonight, but we'll have a lot in 2 weeks. Any old or new business? Then looking at the upcoming events, getting ever closer to the end of school, several celebration events coming up over the next month. Those are all listed there. And our next board meeting is April 15th, in 2 weeks on Monday night. So,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned.